Welcome to Scaling with People, your weekly playbook for turning chaos into compounding growth. Each week, we go under the hood with battle-tested experts in all areas of business, from marketing to sales, operation, finance, and people, plus product and leadership, to unpack the plays, numbers, and systems that turn chaos into compounding growth. Learn straight from founders and experts who've done it and continue to do it successfully. There's zero fluff, just moves that you can steal immediately. This podcast is brought to you by Guide to HR, human expertise, AI-powered impact.
Welcome, everyone, to today's Scaling with People podcast. I'm Guinevere Curry, your host and founder and CEO of Guide to HR. On this episode, we're throwing a grenade into the old marketing playbook. I have Mark Donnigan here, who's a virtual CMO, creator of Marketing Pod, and a builder of more than 500 million in enterprise value. It's where we're going to make the case that the best marketing team might actually be the leanest, smartest, and most AI powered in one room. So what are we talking about? We're getting into why small teams can outrun bloated departments, why your CMO should act more like your fifth salesperson in the brand policy, and why chasing output is yesterday's game when real growth is measured by impact. If your startup is tired of slow execution and marketing theater, this one is for you. Well, thanks, Mark, for joining us today. I'm excited to have you here. Everyone is so resource constrained. So what do you do and how can founders get started?
Guinevere, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited for the conversation. Resource constraints, I have come to realize in my journey of over 20 years supporting founders and really working exclusively with startups is actually a benefit. Now, I know in the moment, it can feel like, if I had more people, if I had, more money to spend on marketing, we could run further, faster. And there's an element to that. But really, the magic today are small teams that can move fast, that are nimble, that are free of a lot of the process constraints that come with a larger organization. And, it's a different mindset, but it's the truth.
Yeah,
It
that
really
makes
is.
so much sense. And I feel like, especially with AI and everything that's going on, it just
Yes.
seems like there's so much opportunity to reimagine the marketing
Yeah.
playbook. So for the founders listening right now, what's the ideal first marketing team structure before they start
Yeah.
hiring aggressively?
Now that's the question, right? Is okay, so I'm ready to now make my first hire, or maybe I have someone who's sort of, it's like I've converted them from a product role and kind of said, "Hey, congratulations, you're now marketing hire number one," Um, so what I found is that in my experience, especially if you're dealing with a more technical product solution, is it first of all you need someone who has domain expertise. Now,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that they need to be an engineer. In fact, they probably shouldn't be an engineer, but they need to have domain expertise because with the tools that are available to us today, creating marketing assets, is I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easier. So creating the asset is no longer the challenge. It's connecting that marketing asset or those approaches to the market. That is what's going to make or break, really success in terms of a breakthrough. And you know what? If you don't know the market, if you don't know the industry, if you don't, if you can't get into the, kind of the buyer's head, and understand the buyer's journey, then, we may be creating a lot of content, but it's just not connecting to the market. And so, my strong advice with founders is really to start out. You need to be the first marketer, you know, just like founder-led sales really is the right way to start from a selling perspective. It's the same in marketing. But as soon as you have some momentum behind you, and you're like, hey, I now need someone who's a bit more of a specialist, knows how social media works, works, knows how to do email marketing, understands how a website should be built and configured. Well, get someone who has that expertise, but they really do need to know the market that you're in. They really do. And that's where I would start. In fact, I would start with someone who's maybe a little bit less of a marketer and more of a domain expert.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And, as a founder myself, I do find that I kind of let myself get lost in the plethora of activities you can do in marketing. And a lot
Right.
of it does feel
Easy to
not to,
do.
yeah. And it's a little bit more, I'm not going to say administrative, but administrative, right? It's a little more
Yeah.
tactical. It's a little bit
Yeah.
more like, task oriented.
Yeah.
And I preach all the time to my founders, like when it comes to that kind of activity, give
Mm.
it to somebody else. You need to be focusing on your investors and your clients.
Yeah.
However, I do hear your advice. So, kind of with the frame of both of those lenses,
Yeah.
how does a founder kind of, yeah, they are the first marketing person, but don't get stuck in that minutia of tactical. Like, what is it that they need to learn and do
Mm.
as the first marketer before they hire that first true
Yeah.
employee marketer?
Well, I think looking at the prototype of like founder led sales. One of the I'm a seller who became a marketer, so I often call myself a revenue driven marketer. So I'm always approaching the marketing strategy with how do we, as Christopher Lochhead likes to say, ring the cash register. How do we ring the cash register? I.e., it's one thing to say, wow, look at my amazing website. But you know what? If it's not converting, if it's not properly telling the story of who we are, what we can do, how we can help, how we can solve problems, then it's not going to work. You know,
Yeah.
so if we go back and we look at as a founder, the founder made those initial sales, right? That also means that the founder is going to be closest to what resonates in the buyer's psyche,
Yeah.
as they are thinking about the problems that they need to solve, what is really resonating. And, really, marketing on some levels is quite simple. It's having a very well tuned ear to what is the market going to pick up on. The easiest or the quickest or the soonest, or just simply understand, what are those messages that they're going to say, tell me more, you
Hmm.
know, and then the marketing, role, the marketing function is to amplify. So, what I really think for a founder is a founder needs to be there to provide that input into, the marketing function. Like, hey, when we go to the market, here is what it cares about. Here's what's resonating with buyers. Now, what are all of the creative ways that we can say that without just sounding like we're singing the exact same song over and over and over again? Um, Advice that I give is that, when we are tired, we're just sick and tired of saying, what it is that we have to say about our point of view. The market is only just starting to pick up on it, which is to say that
Interesting.
marketers are always like wanting to change, like, change the campaign, like, oh, that's so old, we need to change our homepage. No, the market may just be starting to pick up, on what your core, value messages are, value statements are, and so now we need to find new creative ways, to be saying the same thing, because no, we don't want to just be running the same videos, 18 times a day on LinkedIn. That is going to oversaturate and people are just going to, kind of turn us off and they might unsubscribe from our email newsletter. So we need to find new ways to say it, but don't go changing. Your value props are your value props, your value statements are your value statements. And so That's actually a pretty important insight, is that I think founders are quick to move through and feel like, oh, I need to come up with something new to say. We've been saying this for 6 months now. The market knows it. No, the market doesn't. The market hasn't gotten it yet. So we
What's
probably have
a
another
what's
six
a good
months.
like clue or sign that they have gotten it and it is time to
Ah,
change?
ah, okay. So when you're sellers, and again, the seller might be the founder, you might
Yeah.
still be in that phase depending on where you are in your growth, your market development. But when the sellers start to report back, and this is kind of anecdotal, it's hard to put numbers or metrics behind this,
Ooh,
but
says a
when
sales and marketing person. Okay.
yeah, yeah. But when you feel like you're going into meetings and the sales team is going into a meeting and you put up kind of the first few slides, the positioning slides, and the the customer, the client, the prospects, however it works for your business, is kind of like, yeah, you know what? We get that. Can we move to,
Mhm.
in other words, they're kind of either overtly giving you the signal, or they're just flat saying it like, hey, we get that. You know what, we've been hearing about you guys. Let's move to, how do you implement your solution? How is your solution integrated? When they're moving you along, then you're like, okay, the market's now starting to get it. But if you put up those slides and you're still kind of met with the skeptical look, and you're still kind of, people have their arms crossed, and they're even just asking practical questions like, but why? I get it. I hear what you're saying, but why? If you're still in that phase, then you know what? You got to keep hitting them with the first part of the story, which is, what problem are you solving? you know, what's the benefit? Why did you choose to solve that? And what is your point of view that makes your solution, your product, your technology uniquely qualified? Kind of thinking about the jobs to be done framework, to address it.
Yeah,
And
that
why,
makes so
and
much
and
sense.
therefore, why should I be listening to you? You know, so
Yeah.
so that is marketing's job, is
Yeah.
to make the case very plainly, very clearly, easy to understand, do it in the ways that the buyer's going to receive.
I love that. And kind of going back a little bit more to the small teams beat big
Yeah.
teams concept, because I think that really
Yeah.
resonates with all founders.
Yeah.
I'm curious from your perspective, like when have you seen, like, what's a moment in your career where a small team has actually outperformed a much larger one?
Well, I have a lot of examples, but one of the company I've been running marketing for 5.5 years now is a silicon company, and of course, silicon is really hot.
Of
The
course, yeah.
GPU category, and we have formed a whole new category, formed and created a whole new category called VPU, video processing units, VPU, and it's a type of silicon. And I won't get into all of the details behind that, but it's a whole new approach, whole new way to encode video. So when you're watching a service like Netflix, for example, you potentially are actually watching this company's products in action, but
Interesting.
it's a whole new approach. And we knew that the market was tipping, that the market had tipped when we would go into talk to a customer, and they would say, yeah, we're really interested. We called you, or we requested this meeting because we're starting to think that we need VPUs. Now, small teams beat big teams when you realize that your competitors are companies like AMD. And AMD has a marketing department that is larger than the entire company. You kind of go, okay. Small teams beat big teams. And the reality of the matter is that, is that why is that? Well, guess what? You have a whole social media team. You have a
Hmm.
whole events team to navigate. And I'm speaking of
Yes.
these bigger companies.
Yeah.
You have a CMO, you have a vice president, you have multiple directors who all have their perspectives on how those respective functions operate.
Yeah.
So, it was super interesting. We were lucky enough to win an Emmy Award, a technical Emmy Award, a
Wow.
very, very serious, in the media and entertainment space. This is, this is a really, really big deal. And so here we are sitting at the table, and AMD was also nominated, and there were two people from AMD, and here we are with eight people from this small, tiny little company, you know, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, wow, this is a combination of technical execution. We had the right product. We built the product. It's been adopted in the market, but we drove this through. And here, there's the mighty, this much larger, incredibly, powerful and revered company. And there's two individuals, and here we are, eight people sitting around them, represented. And I just went, this is amazing. It's like
Yeah.
I have a marketing team of three people, at the time. Now the team's expanded a little bit, but three people who drove this outcome. And here's AMD,
Amazing.
with an army of marketers,
Yeah.
and we're sitting at the same table,
That is so
So
amazing.
it
I
was
love that
really,
story.
it was a practical, manifestation, I guess, of, like this really works. This isn't theoretical. This isn't like, well, of course we're a startup. We don't have the budget to go hire, a whole events team and a whole digital team and a
Yeah.
whole social team and a whole, we don't have that, which is true statement. But the magic behind it is that you cut the infrastructure that actually holds back execution.
Oh,
And
yes. Yeah.
and
Makes
and
sense.
and this is I think the magic behind a startup. And you're seeing this play out. How is it that OpenAI can be one of the fastest growing software companies in the world? How is it that Anthropic can go from zero revenue to, 3, 4, 5, 6 billion? I don't even know where they are right now. I mean, it's just every quarter, it's just scan. Of course, they're a private company, so it's not disclosed, but, it gets talked about. How is it that these companies can scale in 18 months, in 6 quarters, 7 quarters, 8 quarters, just breathtaking rate? It's because there isn't the infrastructure in the middle to hold them
Yeah.
back,
Exactly. That middle
and
management layer that just
exactly.
really is
And
a gatekeeper.
look, why is it that Amazon has eliminated 14,000 jobs, and the rumors are that that's even going to expand? Now I'm very sensitive and very I feel for all of these management layers, these managers who are getting eliminated. But why is Amazon doing that? It's to eliminate infrastructure that slows down the organization,
Well,
you know?
there's just so many mouths that have to share the same message the same way, and misalignment happens in a nanosecond.
It happens so quickly, it's not even because anybody is trying to pull in an opposite direction,
Right.
so, but it is like, even in a startup, you go from 50 people to 100 people, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, not everybody's in alignment with the founder.
Yeah.
Like I remember the days when it was 20 people, 30 people, 40 people, everybody kind of just ate together at lunch, and like there was automatic alignment, right? Just because
Exactly.
everybody's in the same room together. All of a sudden, at 100 people, you're like, whoa, we now have three offices. And guess what? This team over here is a little bit out of sync. Not
Yeah.
because they want to be, because they're just out of sync. They're,
Yeah.
So,
Interpretations of words and understanding also
yeah,
have a big impact. But
yeah.
going back to the smaller teams, where does AI change that equation the most? What
Yeah.
have you seen the impact of AI be?
So that is a great question. Because so normally what would happen, the natural development of a marketing team was you would typically hire a generalist who was kind of up and coming in their career, and you give the person a director title, but let's face it, they're a department of one, so it's like, this is my director of marketing, but it's a chance for them to build. Usually the remit was, hey, we need you to come in. Initially you're a team of one, but we have budget, or we soon will have budget for you to begin to build a team, and this is a great opportunity. And you get on the right in the right company, and it generally was, a little bit like joining a rocket ship. Next thing you know, you've got 20 people, reporting to you. And so what would happen is you would hire a generalist, but a generalist who could go reasonably deep in enough of the disciplines of marketing that they could come in and they could execute on social. They knew how to build some sort of narrative, so they could look at the website and say, hey, are we saying the right things? They had done a few events, so they kind of knew like how to do an event. So they come in and it's like super, super busy. And then you begin to hire the specialist. Okay, we now have budget. We just raised our Series B, or the board has said, yes, it's time to go ahead and do marketing. So, you hire a social person, you hire a digital person, you hire an events person, and now you've got some more specialists, right? Well, and so then those people would come in, and the digital marketing person is a specialist on the digital platforms, knows how to get more reach on LinkedIn, knows how to run ads on Google, knows those platforms. Well, what's happened now is that the LLMs can do a lot of that work way better than a specialist can. So then you start to say, well, wait a second. Does that mean we don't need humans? Oh, no, we need humans. But the role of the human in the loop is in two primary areas. One is to be the human in the loop, to be, reading and checking and screening this all of this content that's being generated by the LLMs, by AI, you know, to maybe just make sure like, hey, wait, this actually is saying what we want it to be saying. This doesn't just sound like AI slop, or it's not AI slop. Well, that's a human that's going to do that.
Yeah.
Because again, it's a human who knows the industry, knows the market, understands the psyche of the buyer, and is going to be able to get in and think like a buyer. That's a human. Right now, the LLMs can't do that. Now, I say right now,
Yeah.
as the models are just getting amazingly sophisticated, we're going to increasingly get to a space where more and more we're able to just copy and paste. But we're
Yeah.
absolutely not there yet. So you need a human at this level of taking on the buyer's persona, thinking like the buyer, thinking like whoever we're creating this marketing for, and then saying, hey, does this work? You know, um, and then we have the strategy layer. So what's actually interesting is that now the most valuable people in marketing are kind of, not to say we don't need specialists. Okay. So I am not saying like, hey, if you've invested 12 years of your career, as a digital marketer, and you've got, all the certs hanging on the wall, from all the major organizations, that's no longer useful. So I'm not saying that's not useful. However, the marketer who has the broad experience, but then has learned how to harness the tools meaning the various LLM platforms, and is actually going to be able to run faster than someone who is a specialist in a narrow domain. Because to be frank, a lot of that expertise of optimizing ads on Google, or optimizing ads on Meta, or, really, writing, subject lines for email newsletters. A lot of that is being commoditized, commoditized in the LLMs.
Yeah.
And there's some just, you open up X, open up LinkedIn, and it's just nothing but marketers saying, I killed, this function with this with this
Yeah.
agentic workflow. Now, that rarely is really true. But when you really dig in and you look at what they're demonstrating, you go, "Oh wow, they're starting to get into the area of the target." Like, no, they're
Yeah.
not hitting the bullseye. And yes, this is a demo. It's definitely not ready for prime time, but this is starting to get pretty darn close to the bullseye.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
ignore that would be at the peril of somebody who wants to maintain a career in marketing, you know.
Yeah.
And so I guess my answer about how AI both contributes and then, maybe the subtext or the follow-on question would be, how does AI disrupt marketing? Is to say humans are still absolutely needed, but if someone has built their career or sort of has hung their hat on, hey, I know Google better than anyone else, like that's kind of a dangerous place to be,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's just not as valuable. Now, being a human in the loop, with an agentic workflow that you're designing and operating, or maybe you're operating as a specialist, now that's valuable. That is valuable. So,
Yeah, wow, that's amazing, Mark. I love it. And I think, you're right. AI is not necessarily coming after jobs yet, but it's more of who understands how to use it. Those are
yeah,
the people that are going to come after
yeah,
those that don't understand it.
yeah,
Gosh, I have so many other questions for you, but we're coming to a close here. So I like to
yes.
ask my final question to you is, based off this topic or even your experience working with founders, is there any last final thoughts or tips or tricks that you'd like to share with the audience today?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, if you're a founder and you're at that stage where you're saying, "Hey, it's time for me to start investing in building a marketing function," or, or you just have a feeling like I really need to understand marketing. A lot of the founders I work with come from technical backgrounds. And so, they've spent their career building products, oftentimes in big companies where, there was a whole marketing team, or, they, if you, let's face it, you come out of Apple, you come out of Google, you come out of Meta, like a failure, is like, oh, sorry, we only had 35 million signups in the first week,
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
we hope to have 50 million, and, and I'm not making light, I'm not making fun, but it's like, a lot of founders I find come from, where there was big brands behind them, so they create a product and it's like, well, yeah, the product's so good and look how many users we got. Well, all of a sudden you go out on your own and you realize, whoa, not everybody's Google,
Yeah,
not everybody's
exactly.
Apple, you know. So what my advice is really pretty simple. It is, and hopefully founders are doing this, but I find everybody could do more of it, is get out and talk to your customer.
Mm.
But don't talk to your customer about your product. And in fact, do everything to try to not talk about your product, which is really hard because, hey, this is your baby, you've spent, a lot of time, energy, and money, perhaps, building the product. And it probably really does what you say it will. And it really will have the impact. But get out and understand, what does the buyer really care about? Because it doesn't mean that they don't care about your solution or don't need your solution. But if you don't understand how they're going to use it, the problem it's going to solve, and how they think about that problem, you could be putting messages into the market that they just don't understand. It's a little bit like speaking a different language, and they're sitting here going, I can kind of tell from your body move. I kind of get what you're saying. I think I understand, but I don't understand it enough to say, hey, let's go take a look at this.
Yeah.
And that mismatch is where I find routinely startup founders get stuck. They go out, they win a couple early deals, take that as positive signs that, hey, the market wants or needs what we have, which the market does. The problem is they assume that whatever they did to get those deals is repeatable pattern, or is the
Yeah.
language to use. And sometimes that's not true. There can be a
Yeah.
whole lot of reasons why those first few deals came in. So go out once you as a founder have a sense of what the market wants to hear, needs to hear, what the market's going to respond to, then all of a sudden you know how to design your sales process. You know who to hire in sales. You know now how to at least direct your marketing messages. And now the person that you're bringing in to, your first director of marketing or your first few marketing hires, you know how to guide them. But without that, you can bring in the best marketer in the world. You can bring in an absolute rock star CMO, and they're going to fail because they're going to put the wrong messages into the market. They're going to be making statements that, the market kind of goes, huh, okay. Hey, good luck with that, you know?
Yeah.
And this is why you'll see tech startup after tech startup have a revolving door of CMO. Every 18 months, there's a new CMO. Every 18 months, there's a new director of marketing, new VP of marketing. Every 18 months, there's a new CRO, new head of sales, et
Yeah.
cetera. Is often it's not the person that failed. The person actually didn't know what they were doing. It's that they were just speaking a different language,
Yeah.
and if you're speaking a different language, it's hard to get people to follow you if you're
Yeah,
not
that makes so
listening.
much sense. Well, I appreciate your time, Mark, and all the insights you've given us. And for those listening, I hope you got a couple tidbits out of it. We will see you on the next episode. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Scaling with People. If you got value from this conversation, do me a favor, share it with someone building something big. And hey, I'd love to hear your take. Drop a comment, shoot me a message, or start a conversation. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the bold, unfiltered strategies we drop every week. I'm Guinevere Query, founder and CEO of Guide to HR, where we help high-growth companies scale smart with people-first strategies and AI-powered systems that don't just keep up, they lead. If you're building fast and want your HR to move faster, head to guidetohr.com and let's talk. And remember, scale isn't just about speed, it's about people. Until next time, have a great one.